Hi everyone, Professor Mendez here. In this video, I'll be talking to you about Piaget's theory. Piaget's theory focuses on the changes in cognition over time, particularly within childhood. And just as a reminder, cognition includes capacities such as thinking, learning, perceiving, remembering, and understanding. So Jean Piaget was a psychologist who lived from 1896 to 1980, and he was the first to systematically study cognition. Before Jean Piaget began investigating cognition, the overarching consensus was that young children, or children in general, were not as sophisticated thinkers as adults. And Jean Piaget's work focused on, well, how exactly does cognition emerge, and how do children think differently than adults, not less than, or in less sophisticated ways. He was primarily interested with fundamental concepts like the understanding of numbers, time, quantity, cause and effect, and so forth. There are three main areas that I want to discuss in this video as it relates to Piaget's theory, which is what his understanding was, or how he explained cognitive development, the concept of schemes, and then I want to get into the 4 stages of his theory. Jean Piaget saw cognitive development as a reorganization between physical maturation, or physical capacities, and environmental experiences, such that as children got older and they had more physical capacities and different experiences, then their cognition would change. Piaget talked about how children construct or make up their own understanding of the world, and it's not make up like, out of thin air, but rather based on the experiences that they have with their new physical capacities and how their environmental changes might occur around them. He also talked about how sometimes children would experience discrepancies and they must reorganize, meaning that they had a certain idea of how the world worked, and based on either new physical capacities or new experiences with the environment, they had to reorganize what they previously thought. That leads us to the schemes. So Piaget talked about how children and adults, but particularly children, since it's a child development theory, had what are called schemes, or these mental structures, which are kind of like categories in the brain. That would be a good way to explain it. And based on the physical maturation and experiences, the schemes, these mental categories, would either expand or they would change. So through this process of assimilation and accommodation. So when we're thinking about assimilation, that's when new events are incorporated into existing schemes. For example, a child who learned once they have the capacity for grasping, if they let go of a spoon while they are in the high chair, when the spoon hits the floor, it will make a sound. And when a plate hits the ground, it will make a sound. Now, accommodation refers to when schemes have to adjust or change based on new experiences. So a child who's been used to maybe letting go of their spoon or their plate on the high chair, if they begin doing this with food, they might find that when they drop, say, a piece of broccoli onto the ground, it will not make that sound of clinging as metal does when it hits the tile. So they would need to then accommodate. So not everything that I drop makes the same sound. These are new experiences, new information. Piaget also suggested that cognitive development happens in stages. That is, each different stage, and there are 4 stages in his theory, there are new ways of new changes when we're thinking about cognition. He also suggested that these stages happen in a fixed order. So the very first stage is sensorimotor, which is then followed by the preoperational stage, which is then followed by concrete operational stage, and then the last theory, a formal operational stage. This differs from other stage theories in that Piaget suggested that these stages happen in this particular order, whereas other stage theories you might see some back and forth, and the third theory can the third stage, someone can be in the third stage and then they can go back to the second, and so on and so forth. That's not what Piaget suggested. When thinking about the first stage, so we're going to go over the 3 stages as they pertain to childhood, because the last one, formal operational stage, we see that more in adolescence, so after middle childhood. So we're not going to focus on that one in this video. The sensory motor stage, the overview is that reflexive scheme, so infants are born with these reflexes such as grasping, sucking reflex, and other reflexes for survival. And Piaget suggested that during the sensory motor stage, as infants are having experiences with the world and they can physically do new things, then that sets the groundwork for these early concepts, so these early ideas of how the world works. The main task or concept that you would expect a child to develop in the sensory motor stage is that of object permanence, which is, I want to go back, instead of calling it task, we'll call it achievement. So the main achievement of this stage is object permanence, so which is knowing that an object still exists even if it's hidden. So when we're thinking about experiences with the world, is being able to see an object and then it being out of sight, like maybe a ball that rolled away and then for some reason through crawling came up against the ball again. It's like, wait a minute, what is this ball? I thought it disappeared. I want to say games like Peekaboo teach object permanence, but I want to make sure that I focus on the individual aspect of the experiences that Piaget suggested. The pre-operational stage, which we would see from around 2 to 7 years of age, in this stage, thinking is very rigid, so one dimension and really focused on the here and now. In children in this stage, they, as Piaget suggested, are engaged in egocentric thought. As they are having experiences in the world and physical maturation expands, the child constructs a view of their world. However, that view of the world is from their perspective, which is that egocentric thought, seeing things from the child's own perspective. Also, during this stage, children are able to engage in symbolic representation. So that's the ability to represent cognition, so their thinking, their ideas, through the use of symbols. So in terms of play may represent what a child remembers, how a child makes sense of the world. Okay. Also, symbolic representation can refer to the use of letters and of words, which we see that happening increasingly more during the pre-operational stage. The last stage that we'll cover here, but it's not the last stage of Piaget's theory, is the concrete operational stage, which we expect to happen from 7 to 12 years of age. In this stage, thinking is more flexible, more complex. You see children engage in more of adult logic. However, they still their understanding of the world is still based on concrete, so things that are tangible that they can see, not necessarily abstract thought. We don't see that until the next stage. And then they could focus on multiple dimensions, so it's going out of that egocentric thought and being able to understand the world not just from their perspective, but the perspective of others. Children in this stage can understand conservation, so really having an understanding of numbers, mass, and weight. Also, children in this stage can engage in decentration, so being able to focus on more than one aspect of a problem or a situation. Also, they engage in seriation, so being able to place objects in a series, either by age, height, weight, and also they can do this for 2 different dimensions at once, so being able to place the same object, in this case say people, order them by age, but you can also order people by height, so that's that multiple dimension. And then also children can engage in transitivity, so that's that understanding that if A exceeds B in some property and B exceeds A, then A must also exceed C. So really understanding the relationship between objects. So this will all make sense in understanding what these concepts look like when you observe Piagetian tasks. So Piagetian tasks are used to evaluate children's thinking across stages. So they're asked to complete tasks, and then they are evaluated by the logic that they use to complete those tasks. There are several videos about the Piagetian tasks that can be found on YouTube, and I'll be adding a link below to some videos that were put together by other users so that you can see the concepts of the stages in action. So, in a nutshell, that is Piaget's theory. An understanding of this theory requires you to be familiar with these concepts, but also see what they look like in action, and that's where the Piagetian tasks come into play. So, make sure that you view this video as many times as you need to, and then also that you click on the link below to see these tasks and children in different stages completing them. That's it for now.